Through the Gates is produced under the support of the Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management to enhance, promote, and defend the North American model of wildlife conservation and responsible wildlife management. That's our mission. We're engaged in fighting at every level so that wildlife management remains science-based and conservation continues to work for our wildlife. To learn more and join the movement, visit SaveTheHuntColorado.com. The North American model of wildlife conservation is the greatest conservation model in the world. It's a success story that should be shared and celebrated because everybody is a part of it. Welcome to a short update with Through the Gates. I'm actually in a hotel room in Grand Junction, Colorado, getting ready for the Colorado Mule Deer Association banquet. And I get a chance to present to those guys this evening on the coattails of what we did this past week at the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission meeting. The video on this is nothing exceptional, but the audio should be just fine for us to be able to distribute a message that probably will start to resonate fairly well and fairly soon on the internet. I did an update briefly for social media pertaining to the new initiative that was filed for a ballot initiative for 2026, and it's Initiative 98. I'll get into the logistics of that, and I think it's worth noting that what we're dealing with here in the state of Colorado is not anything that's new to other states, but it's probably a little bit more concise as to what our opposition wants to accomplish over the course of the next 18 or 20 months during the last part of the term for Governor Jared Polis, and what I consider to be part of the term for his spouse, Marlon Reese. The particular ballot question that came up that was filed on Friday the 13th, nonetheless, is a question that says, shall the Colorado create a landscape connectivity commission funded by a 0.05% sales tax, or 5 cents per every $100 purchase, to support wildlife habitat protection, voluntary land stewardship, rural education, and local conservation partnerships. The tax is estimated to raise about $150 million per year and would be retained and spent under the Colorado Taxpayers' Bill of Rights, which in Colorado is best known as TABOR. Some of the things that people need to understand about this, and it's worth noting that this is the third attempt that these particular individuals have come to the Legislative Council and eventually tried to get to the title board, where it started out as Initiative 52, then went to Initiative 82. And while they haven't withdrawn Initiative 82, this is an additional attempt to try to get what they're wanting to get through the Legislative Council to get the title set and hopefully get it on the ballot for 2026. The short title of this is Article 8.5, and it's Colorado Working Lands and Wildlife Corridors Act. Now, the previous one that we're still having to worry about is the Colorado Wildlife Biodiversity Protection Act. The reason it's so misleading and deceiving is because when you get into the 10-page document and how this thing is actually deciphered by what is in writing, if any of this stuff was to take effect and actually make it on the ballot and get voted on and be enacted, essentially Colorado Parks and Wildlife and the managing agency in our state of Colorado would no longer exist. It even talks about disfunding and disfunding and debanding and disfunding. It's worth noting through this entire process that the ultimate goal is to stop all consumptive use of wildlife, whether it's domestic or otherwise. The people of Colorado recognize that maintaining healthy landscapes of wildlife habitat is essential to the long-term prosperity of rural communities, outdoor recreation, agriculture, and responsible land management. Now, ladies and gentlemen, they're just not talking about public lands, they're talking about private lands as well. They want to impose a commission that oversees private land utilization and be able to determine from their perspective of what would be an endangered or keystone species without the science-based wildlife management agency that we currently have in Colorado. It also says that the landscape connectivity supports native wildlife, reduces costly wildfire and flood risk, and preserves Colorado's natural heritage for future generations. If you look at 33.1.101, the mission of Colorado Parks and Wildlife, they are already doing that. And they are doing it on the coattails, the backbone of license sales, of license purchasing sportsmen and women, not just from Colorado, but from around the country that come here to recreate and pursue game under the North American model of wildlife conservation. It goes further and says local landowners, ranchers, and conservation partners play a critical role in voluntary habitat stewardship and long-term resource protection, and a science-based, nonpartisan commission with clear accountability will ensure state investments are efficient, transparent, and aligned with Colorado's constitutional protections. We already have that. We don't need a ballot initiative to turn around and try to substantiate what we already have. Accordingly, the purposes of this Article 8.5 R2 establish a landscape connectivity commission to strengthen voluntary conservation programs and support working lands, habitat resilience, and wildlife movement across Colorado. Once again, we already have that to the tune of a $400 million plus agency with about 1,100 full-time employees and about 1,100 seasonal employees. Ensure that core ecological protections continue in the event existing state wildlife agencies are unable to carry out their duties. Well, the only reason that they're unable to carry out their duties is because we have overreaching administrative governor agendas that are trying to undermine every single aspect of that management program and the science-based program that's been there for 127 years. Create a Colorado habitat stewardship network to assist private landowners, improve habitat conditions, and support species recovery. What the hell do they think that is going on? They think that none of this is already happening. But the fact of the matter is, they don't like the way it's happening. They don't think it's happening their way, and they want to turn around and mandate public and private resources through this supposed nonpartisan commission. Once I get into the explanation of that, you'll see that it has nothing to do with anything that we are working with currently or what has been proven over the last 127 years. But it shows the undermining this and the deceit and the lies and the fallacies and falsehoods of what these people decide they want to have done with Colorado's natural resources, whether it's public or private land. It also goes on further to say, provide financial tools, including voluntary incentives and grants, to advance conservation goals in partnership with rural communities, tribes, and local governments. And to ensure this article supplements and does not conflict with federal laws or local land use authority. Well, I don't know if they've paid attention to anything, but all of this has already been done. Now, it's not necessarily being done the way it was intended because of the undermining agenda of this particular Polis administration and what they're trying to accomplish. But I can tell you that what they're trying to accomplish through this commission and through this Biodiversity Protection Act, this Wildlife Corridors Act, is nothing other than undermining science-based wildlife management, not just in Colorado, but it will and continue to set a precedent for what goes on in the rest of the western United States and likely the rest of the country if this was to pass. Legal precedent is often referenced many, many times when you get into things like this, and it needs to be understood that there is no good that could come out of this unless you're on their particular side. The Wildlife and Ecosystem Conservation Commission Creation and Membership Authority. The membership, now listen to this. The membership will include 3 academic ecologists appointed by the governor from nominations submitted by a panel of accredited Colorado University departments specializing in ecology and or related environmental sciences. It also includes 2 conservation biologists appointed by the executive director of the Department of Natural Resources from a list of nominees submitted by a panel of nonpartisan environmental organizations with recognized ecological expertise. It has 1 representative nominated by the Ute Mountain Tribe and appointed by the governor. 1 representative nominated by the Southern Ute Mountain Tribe and appointed by the governor. 1 environmental policy specialist appointed by the Attorney General from a list of nominees submitted by a panel of accredited academic or nonprofit legal or policy institutes with demonstrated conservation expertise. And 1 wildlife management expert appointed by the executive director of the Department of Natural Resources from a list submitted by a panel of academic, tribal, or field-based wildlife institutions with experience in ecological management or species regulation. The nomination panel is valid only if composed of at least 3 eligible and independent entities. The entities serving on each panel shall be publicly disclosed at the time of nomination and may serve again in future nominations, provided there is no evidence of favoritism or conflict of interest. New panels shall be formed only when a vacancy arises or a seat reaches the end of its term. No appointing authority may alter, substitute, or reject nominees provided by a valid panel, except in cases of documented conflicts of interest. The powers and responsibilities of this is unbelievable. The nomination panel formation is unbelievable. The commission shall serve as an enforcement body and shall provide scientific and policy recommendations to the Department of Natural Resources, the division, and other relevant state or federal agencies on matters related to wildlife protection, habitat connectivity, and biodiversity conservation. The commission may designate state-listed endangered species under Colorado law, consistent with Section 33-8.5-1042D. They can also conduct independent ecological impact assessments, including assessments conducted by the commission or qualified third parties not affiliated with the project proponent. They can require mitigation for any proposed land use, infrastructure, or development project that the commission determines may significantly harm endangered species or wildlife corridors. Mitigation must follow these standards and hierarchy established in this article, prioritizing avoidance and minimization before any compensatory actions. It's worth mentioning that now they want to turn around and be the commission that they get to pick, and then they get to decide what they want to decide on endangered species, keystone species, land use, public and private, and how that land should be managed. And there's no expert about the particular properties, no stakeholder engagement, none whatsoever. This is a process that could only be deemed as obstruction, deceitful, and agenda-driven. This commission will also develop voluntary conservation programs for private landowners and businesses, including technical assistance, habitat management support, grant or cost share programs, and voluntary conservation certification, which may be funded in whole or in part through commission revenues or external partnerships. And they can issue investigative subpoenas at its discretion, consistent with applicable procedural law, and inspect ecological sites, including any lands or waters with documented or potential ecological value relevant to this article, and refer enforcement cases to the Attorney General, the District Attorney with jurisdiction, or both. The Commission may also designate species as endangered under Colorado law based on the best available scientific evidence, which I have to add in right now, based upon whose scientific evidence, if the agency's not there to turn around and provide that. They want to leave it up to this Commission. Such designations shall complement and not conflict with protections established under the Federal Endangered Species Act of 1973. Where appropriate, the Commission shall coordinate with the United States Fish and Wildlife Service and other relevant authorities, yet to be determined, to support consistent science-based conservation efforts across jurisdictions. In carrying out its duties under this article, the Commission shall meaningfully incorporate The perspectives and expertise of tribal representatives, including traditional and ecological knowledge in all matters relevant to species protection, habitat connectivity, and conservation policy. Accountability and transparency underneath this particular act. The Landscape Connectivity Commission shall operate with full transparency. I'm sure that's going to be the case, ladies and gentlemen, including publicly accessible annual budgets and audits, open meetings subject to the Colorado Open Meetings Law, twice yearly public comment sessions, a requirement to publish an annual report detailing all expenditures, conservation outcomes, and regional project distribution. I get pissed off reading this because the ignorance of these proponents is so demeaning and belittling to a program and a process that has been so efficient with adaptations over the course of the last 125 plus years. The people that are promoting this have no idea what in the hell they're talking about. What they want is all consumptive use and management in the state of Colorado to stop. What they want is agriculture off the landscape, whether it's public or private land. What they want is to defund and disband the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Agency itself and create their own glass bubble, their own terrarium. If we continue to allow things like this to even gain any sort of attraction, Colorado will not be close to anywhere what it is right now, and I don't think it's where it needs to be. But it's a hell of a lot better than the options that these individuals are promoting and professing that would be in the best interest of 961 species of wildlife, not including 7,000 invertebrates the Colorado Parks and Wildlife is in charge of managing. The way that this is laid out is almost like a land grab, like a life grab, like demeaning and admonishing somebody's livelihood and their expertise. It's frustrating that we're going to see these sort of things continually surface at a level and at a rate that is remarkable in the sense to where these hard-headed bastards have no idea what they're talking about, and what they want to try to accomplish is nothing other than to end all hunting, to end all land use, to end all recreation, to end all oil and gas mining and extraction, to end logging, to end four-wheeling. Depending on what they could get done with this, they can determine, this small group of individuals that shows no expertise, no boots on the ground experience, nothing in the best interest of Colorado's wildlife and natural resources. They want to stop it all. The eligibility criteria for corridor participation is something that needs to be looked into. To qualify for incentives under the subsection, the landowner must maintain their designated corridor in accordance with the following conditions as verified by the Commission. No new residential, commercial, or industrial development is permitted except for restoration-related structures. The property must be managed to avoid habitat degradation. Wildlife connectivity must be reasonably maintained throughout the protected areas. The protected areas must remain free from invasive species and extractive land uses. Existing agricultural or recreational uses must be compatible with a commission-approved conservation plan. What the hell do they think that this current Parks and Wildlife Commission and the Department of Agriculture does? Whether we agree or disagree with the current commission's objectives and what they're trying to accomplish, there's a process and there's a procedure, and they work with scientists and they work with the public, and they do it on a monthly basis. Not some behind the doors, we're going to give you a chance to talk twice a year on a panel that you don't know how it's created or who it actually encompasses. The landowner must allow annual compliance monitoring by the commission. Well, I tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, if I'm a rancher or a landowner, I'm not allowing any of these sons of bitches to come on my property. Additional implementation guidelines may be developed and published by the Commission, and the land must remain in protected status for a minimum of 12 consecutive months, with continued eligibility for incentives contingent on annual renewal. The Commission may prioritize or award enhanced incentives for multi-year conservation commitments or enrollment in permanent protection programs consistent with the best available ecological science. Who's going to provide the best ecological science if the agency is not allowed to remain, if the agency is defunded or disbanded? This commission? The individuals from these special interest groups that have now gotten a badge of honor because of this particular Initiative 98? I could go on and on for another 3 or 4 pages on this, but some of the other highlights I will just try to turn around and give you. The enforcement and penalties and corporate accountability. Any person who knowingly and willfully kills, injures, or otherwise causes material harm to a designated, endangered, or keystone species outside of an approved mitigation or reintroduction plan is subject to a civil fine of up to $500,000 per offense, calibrated to reflect the ecological and economic losses of harm, including the cost of restoring or replacing impacted species or habitats. The Commission shall establish guidelines to determine appropriate fines based on the severity and intent and the feasibility of ecological remediation, and criminal penalties may apply if the conduct described in this section also constitutes a violation of applicable criminal law, including but not limited to Section 18-9202 of the Colorado Revised Statutes. Nothing in this article shall be construed to limit prosecution under Title 18, and this section is intended to supplement, not preempt, existing criminal statutes. Also, it says, any person who knowingly or recklessly causes habitat degradation within a designated wildlife corridor is subject to a civil fine equal to the full ecological restoration cost as determined by the Commission, plus a penalty of up to 3 times that is cost based on the severity of harm, the violator's intent, and the level of cooperation with remediation efforts. The Commission may reduce penalties for damage resulting from gross negligence if the responsible party promptly undertakes corrective action in good faith and cooperates fully with the habitat restoration efforts. The Commission shall also adopt guidelines for determining restoration costs and appropriate penalty multipliers based on species sensitivity, habitat type, and intent of the violator. The Commission may assign investigations and inspections to its designated enforcement staff of contractors and may conduct investigations, issue subpoenas, inspect sites, and refer enforcement actions to the Attorney General, the District Attorney, or jurisdiction of both. Any business entity or corporate actor that knowingly causes ecological destruction in violation of this article may be held liable for treble damages. Continued participation in any state-funded conservation program may be suspended or revoked upon finding a willful ecological violation. You can see how frustrated I am, and I think that once you sit down and would read this, you would be just as frustrated. But if you look at the way that this is going to be created, if they actually can get any traction, the wording of this is not just deceitful. The intent is overreaching and undermining. And I would encourage each and every one of you to look this up for yourself with the links that we provide. Do your homework. The first hearing on this particular initiative is June 27th through Legislative Council. And if it was to get through that in any way, shape, or form, it would go to Title Board, just like what we had to do on Initiative 91 or what became Proposition 127. Initiative 52, to the best of our knowledge, is dead. Initiative 82, to the best of our knowledge, is still sitting on the shelf, which is common practice for individuals like this to be able to turn around and try to do multiple initiatives at the same time to see which one that they can get to pass muster. If you recall, on Initiative 91 on the Bobcat and Mountain Lion deal, those individuals with Cats Aren't Trophies did the same thing. They submitted Initiative 91. They also submitted Initiative 101, seeing which one could gain more traction, and if they could get any more grace or leniency on one versus the other. The initial startup plan for this operation of the commission, and stop and think of this, the initial startup plan for this is $5 million and shall be appropriated from the general fund upon voter approval of this article. These funds shall be used solely for staffing, rulemaking, administrative setup, ecological data systems, and early public engagement and conservation planning. If you stayed with me this long on this particular subject, you need to get engaged. Initiative 82 was not anything that would be favorable. Initiative 98 is even a further level of overreach and undermining this that we need to stop in its tracks. The Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management will be steadfast in leading that charge to the best of our possible abilities, but everybody else that is having engagement at every level, whether it's the agriculture community, the mining community, the recreation community, landowners themselves, the conservation community, we need to stay together to make sure that we defeat issues like this before they ever get a chance to get on the damn ballot in the state of Colorado. Initiative 82 is moving forward in some capacity. Initiative 98 is moving forward in some capacity. This is not the last of what we will see. We have Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission issues to deal with. We have legislative issues to deal with. We will continue to have ballot initiative issues to deal with. And everybody's trying to get done what they could possibly get done in the next 18 months before Governor Jared Polis's term is limited and he's termed out. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Follow this podcast Through the Gates on all of your major platforms, and please subscribe and share. Look at the links through this. We'll try to keep you updated as we move forward. But in the meantime, stay the course and aim small, miss small.
If you want to support a company that supported the efforts to defeat Proposition 127, then you need to support Davis Tent. Davis Tent has provided quality canvas goods for outdoorsmen for the last 50 plus years. For more information, go to davistent.com. If you want to support another business that was instrumental in helping us defeat Proposition 127, check out Salida Gun Shop. Salida Gun Shop in Salida, Colorado provides quality products, expertise, and knowledge from individuals that actually do what they sell. Go to salidagunshop.com. Listen to the advice of Cameron Haynes and support companies that are supporting your cause and your efforts. Minturn Anglers is one of those companies. Minturn Anglers provides product and fishing excursions in Colorado and are second to none. For more information, go to minturnanglers.com.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Through the Gates. For more content like this, make sure that you like, follow, and subscribe on all of our channels.